Welcome to the Barbell and Beyond podcast, where we talk to athletes, experts, and coaches about all things related to training and competing in powerlifting. We will bring you the insights and stories that will take your performance, training, and mindset to the next level.
Welcome to the Barbell and Beyond podcast. It's my absolute pleasure today to have Lukas Shaw on the podcast, who is the newest coach to join the Barbell and Beyond coaching team. Interviewing him with me today is my co-host, Luke Selway. So I've recently had a lot of questions from people asking me, are we calling Luke Lukas now? And that is not the case. They are two different people. Both incredibly awesome. So Lukas Shaw, our new coach, is based in Auckland, and he recently signed up for powerlifting and coaching mentoring, business and coaching mentoring. And from the very beginning, he was an absolute standout with how passionate he is about coaching powerlifters, the amount of time he spends researching coaching methodology, and just his sincere desire to help people have the best experience with powerlifting. So I am absolutely stoked that he agreed to join our coaching team. And today we're going to learn a lot more about Lukas. We're going to learn about his background playing high-level football. We're going to learn about some chronic health issues that he had to overcome in order to be the coach and lifter that he is today. And we're going to go deeper into Conjugate Method, which is his preferred style of powerlifting programming. And you'll find out during this podcast how that aligns with our Barbell and Beyond values and coaching ethos, but also how it brings a different coaching methodology and more diversity to the team. So I'm very much looking forward to getting into things. Luke, take us away.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm glad that I dropped the beard a couple of years ago. Otherwise, this would be way more confusing. If we're both shaved head and beards, we're pretty much just twinning it. Yeah, definitely cool to have you on board with the team now. I've enjoyed, I think we just started DMing like randomly a few months ago and kind of chatted over that, and then eventually met up for the long-awaited Guinness and a training session recently. But I think the people would like to know more about you and where you came from, and your sporting history with that. So where did sort of your training history start for you? Was it with powerlifting, or were you, what were you doing sports-wise before that?
So sports-wise, I started off playing football pretty much most of my life.
We're talking American football?
Soccer for the Americans out there.
Sorry.
Yeah. So, the real football, I guess. And so played football most of my life. Ended up playing like under 19s when I was 15 years old in the like top division in Auckland at the time. So that was fun. Got to do some trips overseas for like West Auckland, school guys. Awesome experiences. Ended up having a trial for a team in the English Premier League. That was
cool.
to lead into a college scholarship in the States, but don't know what happened there. Something fell through. Couldn't get hold of the guys after. It was a great experience anyway. And then ended up playing first team at Te Atatu Football Club since I was like 17 years old. I think I had my debut at 16. So playing men's football at 16 was a fun experience.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
Isn't under 17 soccer football in New Zealand the most popular sport? Do you know if that's true?
I'm not sure if it's that age, but I know football is definitely the most popular sport in New Zealand now. So yeah, I think there's a lot of people playing it and interested in the sport now, which is actually really good to see. So basically had to give up playing football because I was a chef as my career. So obviously working weekends made it impossible to train and stuff. And that's when I started like taking my gym training more seriously. I was in the gym since about 18, and I remember starting, and because I was playing football all the time, I was so skinny. I think until I was like maybe 21, I struggled to get over like 70 kilos or something like that. Yeah, so I was tiny. I remember my first day benching even, I was like, couldn't put anything more than 30 on the bar. It just pinned me. So yeah, it's been a bit of a journey. And then ended up going over to the UK to go work in like fine dining kind of thing. So ended up going just below Michelin star level with that, had a really cool team. But then I was starting to miss my sports. So started going into the gym, got pretty bored of just going in and lifting most of the time. So I messaged my mate who was in New Zealand and I used to train with, and he started powerlifting before me. He was like, "Oh, jump on like 531 or something." So started with 531 and enjoyed the strength training more since I had like a goal at the end of it. Um, yeah, then I kind of decided like strength training's fun, but now I want to get into a sport where I can actually like compete. So powerlifting, the obvious choice there. Um, Started off doing like Johnny Candido's 6-week program. You know, the dreaded second week one with the 10 reps of squats and then all the back offs. Yeah. Done that for a while. Started to get pretty bored with just squat, bench, deadlift all the time. I guess even though that is the sport, got a bit boring with training. Probably because I like to be like kind of stimulated all the time and like find interesting things and like learning new skills, I guess. Yeah. So I think one night I was watching like West Side versus the World. It was on Netflix, like just got put on. So that was my first introduction to Conjugate. Went back to work the next day and I was like, these guys are insane. Like, you guys have to watch this, because I worked with a couple other guys that went to the gym. Then I kind of forgot about it and started looking into like Stronger by Science stuff. And I ended up doing the Bulgarian method from Greg Knuckles.
Yeah.
Seemed pretty crazy at first, but I think I chucked on like 40 kilos onto my squat within the like 3 months or something. And then I ended up coming back to New Zealand after that during COVID. Started doing the Bulgarian again, but I guess I like lost all my base. So I found it really hard to progress on that because I went straight into like high intensity, high specificity after like kind of not having that base level after doing the Candido stuff just before it. So I ended up doing the like Bryce Krawczyk 16-week Calgary barbell training for a while. I hated it after a while. I mean, the programming's good, but like my shoulders were getting beat up, my knees were getting beat up. With my work, it was really hard to stay consistent every single day. Sometimes I was getting into the gym at like 10 o'clock at night just to get my session done, and it was just becoming too much. Like, what happens? How does the program work if I'm missing sessions? And like, I'm trying to get into the gym, but when you're doing Wednesday to Sunday, like 10 till 10, it's almost becoming impossible at times. And then I ended up remembering somehow about the West Side film, watched it again, and then just dove deep into how they did it and loved the flexibility of it, loved that I wasn't getting sore anymore. Found it actually like really enjoyable to train again. Easy to fit around my work schedule too. So yeah, that was like my main step into Conjugate there.
I think a lot of us can kind of relate to your journey of trialing different programs that are out there. Once you realize how much is on the internet and how many different styles of programming, it becomes super interesting to do that self-experimentation and to try all those programs. I can certainly relate to the ones that you tried, trial and error back in the day. And then you landed on something that fit you. And I think there are some common misconceptions about conjugate method, because what you're telling us is that you found a style of programming that was efficient time-wise. It could fit into a very busy, energy demanding chefing schedule, and it had the variety that you craved, and you weren't feeling injured or beat up. So can you tell us more about those things?
Yeah. So it took me a while to kind of learn how to structure it all properly, because obviously there's so much information around. I think interestingly, I didn't hit like a proper PR for my first year of trying it. And I don't know why I stuck with it. I think I was just like, it's going to work. It's going to work. It has to keep going. In hindsight, I probably wasn't running it as effectively as I could have. But yeah, stuck with it. Just kept trying to learn as much as I could. the main thing was I wasn't feeling sore all the time. I can train around like little niggles. Like if something was sore, I just swap an exercise out, bring something else back in that targets the same muscles basically and similar movement patterns. So I think that was like the main thing for me.
When did you, in amongst all of this, kind of head into your first time competing and that sort of thing? Was that sort of before you hit conjugate, or was that once you'd kind of established conjugate already?
So that was like, I think I did my first competition 5 months after I started conjugate. The first comp was really funny, I think. It was like a novice comp, maybe in, I think it was 2020 or 21 at North Shore Barbell.
Mm.
No coaching, just self-coached, kind of, read all my stuff online. And then thought, yeah, let's give the sport a proper try now. I guess there's a lot of times where you're kind of thinking like, am I strong enough to compete? But I don't really think there is a point where you're strong enough to compete, because you're always going to want to be stronger. So you just go on and do it. It was definitely one of the best decisions I made sporting wise. I think I loved it. I think I missed my first squat because I didn't listen to the calls, and I was nervous. And then I got the next two, went 3 for 3 on the bench, which is my worst lift. So that was actually quite interesting that I went 3 for 3 on that. And then my best lift, the deadlift, I went 1 for 3 on. I know. So I opened really light as well. And I just remember pulling up and seeing the crowd and just bricking it. And I didn't lock it out. I like, my knees buckled. I think I just got like, let the nerves get the best of me. And then when I went off, I was like, no, we're going to go up, because that was too easy. Went up weight. Same thing happened. Saw the crowd again. Missed the lockout. Obviously got the miss lift. Left the same weight on the bar. Went up, got my third, and I was like, oh my god, just walked away like so embarrassed from it. But
Hey, at least you got that third.
You got
When
the third.
Carli,
You
when
didn't
Carli
bomb.
and I were in Mongolia, especially some of the Mongolian team, I think one guy went 1 for 9. I think he got his second bench out of the whole comp.
oh
Like,
wow.
because he would miss an opener, go up, miss the next to go up, and he just missed everything apart from a single bench. I was like, geez, buddy, like maybe retake a lift, but as long as you get one.
But you self-coached into that meet. You said it was an experience that you absolutely loved, got you hooked, like you loved it. A lot of learnings from your first competition. I think everyone learns a lot. We know that competing is a separate skill to being strong. You have to practice both. What was it that you loved so much about that first competition that encouraged you to keep lifting, training, and to compete again?
Just the atmosphere of it. Everyone cheering everyone on. Didn't matter who it was, how much they were lifting. No one cares. They just love to support each other, and I just got caught up in it as well. It was awesome. I think I remember laughing because I think my mum and my partner came and watched it, and they were stressed because they haven't seen it before, and they were like, "Just don't hurt yourself." And I was like, "It's fine. I do this all the time in the gym, so it's gonna be okay." And then when they're like, not even when I was lifting, when other people were lifting, they're like off the seats yelling at them to like up. And it was quite funny.
That's awesome.
Something that we've spoken a bit about is the fact, you said you'd been running Conjugate for about 5 months. You said that you probably didn't hit a new PB for about a year, but you and I have talked in detail about the fact that what Conjugate does is build you a really good base. So while you might not see rapid results because there isn't the necessarily high specificity, what you do is build a fantastic base that then leads to less injuries. And then once you start, once the methodology and the base has been set, I can see in your training now you're hitting a new PB every week.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit more about that, about having to be patient and how that can build a really cool base for a new lifter?
Yeah, so I think you've hit the nail on the head with that one. Conjugate definitely focuses on building quite a big base. I think that's probably what that 1 year of training would have been, because since then it's just kind of jumped up and up and up. So yeah, really important to build that big base at the start. conjugate kind of is a bit of a slow burn because of how specific it is at times. We can drive progression a bit quicker by adding in specificity, but it, I guess, like, can also lead to getting more beat up and burning out a bit faster at the same time. Yeah, so lots of variations. We're building weak points and trying to develop skill. So a lot of like the variations lead to like skill development long term, but in the short term, it might not be as efficient, I would say. So I think starting in conjugate, you might need to be a bit more patient with how the increases are going to come. Probably won't see as much in the short term, but in the long term, definitely going to have a like high peak that you can hit.
So the trade-off is you have to be a little bit more patient at the beginning, but you follow this methodology, you're going to have less injuries, and you're going to basically build the bottom of that pyramid, build a really good base. And so something we've talked about is the fact that this could be a really good methodology for young lifters or lifters who come into powerlifting who've never played a sport before. I think athletic background and what you've done previously to starting powerlifting actually counts for a lot. That may be one of those underrated things in the intake process. It's like, what is your entire athletic background and where are you now? Because an athlete that's developed athleticism for 20 years is a different athlete to someone who's never done any sport coming into powerlifting. Do you have any thoughts on that, Luke? Like, not Lucas, Luke.
Yeah, I think because I trying to remember here. Does conjugate have GPP or like the general physical preparedness? Is that incorporated? Okay, cool. I too have watched Westside versus the World, but a while ago now, and so I feel like it blends in my head other methodologies that I've looked into, and I'm like, wait, am I misremembering this? But yeah, I think like Carli was saying, if you have athletic background, you sort of have the GPP stuff sort of locked down to an extent, or at least a foundation in it. And I know there are some like amazing athletes who sort of had never really done anything, and then were like, oh, I'm good at powerlifting. And you can imagine somebody like that might actually benefit from just some more general athletic training and skill development and how to learn how to move and all that sort of stuff before they get into very, very specific training that is powerlifting. I know too, as far as skill development goes, the whole sort of idea of varied practice. So not just having, you're not just going to hit comp lifts all the time, but like sometimes you're hitting comp lifts with bands, sometimes you're adding pauses, sometimes you're adding this or that, or different bars and box squats and whatever else, can lead to a more resilient skill where basically, powerlifters, it's the typical, oh, I misgrooved it or whatever. And I've heard that people say, if you misgrooved it, it's because you weren't strong enough to stay in the groove. But I think some of that comes from that more resilient skill set as well, where if you haven't just done the pure competition movement all the time, but you've actually done close variations, you've done different setups and different equipment and that sort of thing, it can allow you to have a more resilient skill where if you move, a couple of degrees outside of the perfect groove for you, you can still actually complete the lift and you can still recover it. Or if you've, especially for in competitions, like if you get to your deadlifts and your quads are completely fried or whatever, you actually have some other movement strategies that you can develop and you can kind of bring out, and you're a bit more resilient as an athlete rather than it just having to go perfectly or completely having the wheels fall off.
Yeah, that's exactly what I agree completely with that. I think we were talking about it the other week, Carli, when we were talking about multilateral development and how it's like having those different sports and different skills leads to a more stable skill set in the long run.
Yeah, I think that sporting background can make a big difference in terms of your athlete might come in with more muscle mass than your average person. They will have more movement strategy. They'll have more skill transfer. So skill acquisition, we know that one movement pattern from one sport, you might be able to relate to it in a different sport and access that. I would also say mindset. And I was going to ask you about this earlier in terms of your soccer career. Like what kind of carryover or skill transfer or mental skill transfer did you potentially have from playing high level soccer that now transfers into your powerlifting or your powerlifting coaching?
Yeah, that's a good one. In football, I don't know. I never really had much doubts playing people. I remember coming up like a lot of guys on my team would be like, oh, that guy plays all whites or like under 17s all whites and stuff like that. And I was the one having to mark him because I was a defender and most of these guys were attackers. And I never had the thought of like, these guys are going to get the better of me. Like, not even once. I was just like, cool, I'm just going to win my individual battle. And I think just having that like little bit of confidence, kind of the same thing, stepping up to a barbell, you just kind of got to think like, I'm just going to nail this lift. I'm just going to do it. And just trying to be positive about it. At the end of the day, though, you can't really trick your mind no matter what you're saying. Like, it knows what you want to think. So trying to set up training in a way that can give you confidence, I think is really important.
I love that. Can you tell us more? How can you set someone up for success from programming, from potentially cueing, from the way that you coach them? How can we do that for an athlete?
Yep. So just by how you're loading the bar, basically, like with our max effort work, we kind of want to be hitting a PR each time we do a max effort lift. Sometimes that's not possible. If I'm kind of looking at a lifter that I know has had a bit of like a rough patch, or they've been like really fatigued with work, or something else is going on in their life kind of outside of training, I'll usually just set up like a PR I know they haven't hit in such a long time, or change the variation to something I know they've not even done yet, so that like they in their head they're like, oh yes, I'm still getting stronger, and we just keep the momentum building that way. And then as you kind of know how training's going with like your accessories, and by watching how fast your like speed work is and everything, then we can kind of pivot into that comp practice lift, like the standard squat bench deadlift kind of thing. So that's usually how I'll kind of look to structure that.
I love that so much. There's some really key points there, which building momentum, setting your athlete up for small wins, and building confidence. And you and I spoke about this yesterday with both our athlete and coaches hats on. We were like, yeah, as an athlete, not coaches hat on, if we know that a PR is there and it's going to motivate the rest of our training, you and I both were like, yeah, we'd probably take it. We'd understand the trade-off, right? We'd be like, okay, this might have this effect later on in the rest of this block, and so on and so forth. But if there's no comp on the horizon and it's going to boost your motivation for training, we both agreed on this. And then we had a chat about the fact that we love our athletes to share those wins with us. For the ones that we're online coaching, if we're not there with them in person, we're like, don't hide anything. Tell us everything. Let us share the experience with you, share the win. And we as coaches, putting coaches hat back on, can then explain the trade-offs, right? This is what effect it will have, but we're going to celebrate that win with you. And thank you for the honest communication, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. And then it's going to definitely lead into that recovery kind of impact. So we're going to have to adjust and
a little bit damage control.
Yeah, that's it. There's no point if you're already starting to dig the hole. There's no point to keep on digging.
I've heard people criticize powerlifting before, with powerlifters being like, I hit a PB today. It was my, no sleeves, but with belts, stiff bar, pin squat, 4.5 reps. Or, you know what I mean? Like, but I honestly don't think it's a bad thing. I think especially later, I was going to say later stage career, if we want to call it career, with lifting, where true comp PRs are going to be few and far between. And it can feel like you're not really working towards anything. And I think with other sports, you might have weekly games, or, during a season or whatever, and you can be like, oh, that was a good game, or, I did this or that better than I normally would. And you sort of have those little points that you can kind of congratulate yourself and track your progress and that sort of thing. And I think with lifting, more opportunities for PRs, even if it's an obscure thing or an accessory lift or something, it's I think totally fine. Like, I often have athletes, maybe they'll overshoot a little bit and they won't pause their bench, and we're like, yeah, it's a PR, it's just a touch and go PR. Like, next time we'll hit it for a pause. Or even squats, if they kind of hit a squat PR but we know that it wouldn't have made it in comp depth, we're like, okay, well, that's still the heaviest you've squatted. Like, you still squatted it, it just wasn't the comp depth, it was just that you're like high squat PR, you know what I mean? Like, it still counts. you still couldn't have done that, however many weeks or months ago. It's still something, and it's still showing us that we're moving in the right direction. And I think it's better to have that mindset than to be like, well, it was 10 kilos more than you've ever had on your back before, but you missed half an inch, so we're going to pretend it didn't happen. Like,
Yeah.
I think the more that you can take the wins that happen, and also, like you said, line it up with, okay, maybe they haven't hit this rep range in a while, but I'm pretty sure they'd hit a rep PR or something like that. I think the more that you can line people up with that, it just makes training so much more enjoyable and stops some of the frustration and the staleness that comes with it.
100%. And we're being realistic. Like, we're not going to tell a lifter a squat's a comp legit squat if they didn't hit depth, right? Like, we're realistic. We're I guess kind in our feedback, considerate and kind in our feedback, but also that's a part of our check-in process that I really love, is that we in our check-in process ask people to look for the wins, and we teach them that skill, because naturally as humans, we're actually not inclined to look for our wins. We're inclined to look for problems and dangers and things that need solving and the negative. And so priming your brain for the positive, I think, is an incredible mental skill to teach a lifter. And the end result is they're going to have a long career enjoying a sport, right?
Exactly. We literally do the sport for enjoyment. It doesn't really one, like, so
if you're
it's
not enjoying it, then what's sort of the point? Like, there's something else that you might be able to do that you can get health benefits from, but that you actually enjoy. And on the point of enjoyment, this is a massive one, Lucas, the variety, the challenge. Tell us more.
Yeah, so we do use a lot of variations. These can be used for like multiple things. Obviously, we're training the skill development, like we talked about before, trying to like change where a lifter needs to improve, and also just trying to stop accommodation. Like, we don't want to keep hitting the same stimulus over and over again, or we might be able to regress. So we want to keep giving them new stimulus, but also with the variation, we're going to be less beat up as well, because it's less like load into those shoulders, into those elbows, into those knees in the same way every single time. It's also more fun. It makes you want to train more, I think. Like, we want to go in and be like, oh, what's on the menu today, right? It's not just the same thing as the last 3 weeks now. So
that definitely appeals to a certain personality type, right? You're going to have your personality type. And I think every coach has seen this, that they have some athletes who are happy to do the same thing week in, week out. You have your golden micro that you run again and again. And one type of athlete can really thrive on that, and it's very predictable progress. And then there's another type of athlete who's like, I've had the same accessory for 2 weeks. Like, are you going to change it up for week 3 or week 4? So have you guys in your coaching sort of identified those different personality types and how to keep your athlete engaged?
Sometimes I get questioned like why it's changing so much, or like why it changes. But I don't think I've ever coached anyone who's not enjoyed the variations. Yeah, pretty much it. I think like everyone I've coached seems to enjoy the way the training's structured. I don't know. I'd get bored doing the same thing every time.
I definitely find I have a bit of a mix where there are some clients who I do need to change it up, or at least even if they're running, 6-week blocks or 8-week blocks or whatever, they want the blocks to have a fair bit of variation between. I have other athletes where block to block, we make very small changes, and they quite like the fact that once they learn an accessory movement, that they don't have to think as much like about, oh, how do I set up for this one? They know the setup, they know the positions, that sort of thing, and they like the familiarity and really being able to lock in and not having to kind of constantly be figuring new things out. So I think from what I've seen, it's definitely a bit of a personality thing where some people prefer the consistency just so that training is a little bit more, I don't want to say like switched off, but they can just focus on the effort, and they don't have to focus on trying to figure stuff out all the time. Whereas other people, their effort goes out the window if they don't have to figure stuff out. They just go into a like cruise control mode, and they just stop applying themselves if it stays the same for too long. And so that's really interesting that you said that, with Conjugate having so much variation, because I've definitely met people who tried powerlifting for a little bit, maybe did a novice comp, but they're just like, it's just so boring. I just can't do this all the time. And so then maybe, a different flavor of powerlifting is actually what they'd benefit most from.
So one thing that's quite interesting, how you said, like, once they know their accessories and they've done it a few times, they kind of just go into cruise control. That's kind of one benefit of being able to swap the variations is we're learning it, so we have to kind of stay stimulated with it. But also it's allowing us to produce more force because we're not as efficient with that movement. So it's kind of like having to keep you thinking about it as well. And yeah, just another way to kind of look at why you can do it.
Can you explain to us a little bit more about how you interpret and define max effort lifts? Because we've seen, for example, on social media that people have really varying ideas of what they would consider max effort. Can you compare and contrast?
Yeah, so for me, max effort, it's basically a max effort's a single. It has to be above 90% to be max effort. And that's just purely there to build intramuscular coordination and intermuscular coordination. You need to be kind of careful with it. Like, we don't want to push to a true comp max, like a third attempt. Otherwise, recovery is just going to be really hard to keep chasing all the time. I'm usually aiming to be above a second attempt, but just under that third, kind of sitting around that like RP 8 to 9-ish. If a lifter is starting to get quite beat up and fatigued, we can also strip that back and do a 3 or a 5 as our max effort lift. It's not a true max effort because it's going to take the intensity down. But
so it's kind of like a gym max effort, a hard effort that makes sense for that lifter on that day at that time. It's not like no matter what, you're going to absolutely max out till you fail. It's quite different.
Yeah, exactly. It's not taking that rep to failure.
Yeah.
I don't usually like to put the weight that I want the lifter to hit on that day because, as you know, it's like purely how they're feeling on the day at the time. What even happened on the way to the gym? Are they angry? Are they upset? Like, what stress has gone on through the day? Too many variables. So I think a lot of it is to do with the lifter on the day, and that's another skill the lifter needs to develop as well.
Yeah, I love that so much. So we're talking about an educated lifter who has experience with auto-regulation, who can make really good decisions on the day. And I think here's where, in everything that we've spoken about so far, you can see how the values or the way that you apply conjugate methodology fits with Barbell and Beyond, right? We are all about autonomy, promoting educated, well-informed, good decision-making, athleticism. And I can see that comes through in your coaching so well, but you use a different methodology. And I think this is really important to acknowledge because a lot of coaches and even coaching companies, everyone does everything the same way. And what I love is that you bring something new to the table. You've got a methodology, but the way you apply it fits so strongly with our ethos and our values. So I really like that. I appreciate that so much. And I think, here we've got a system that can help with reducing injuries, that can be more fun and bring more variety and increase motivation for lifters. And so I guess what I'm saying is I'd encourage people to keep an open mind. There's not one way to get strong. There are lots of different ways to get strong, and you want to find the way that works for you with the coach that you resonate with. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree.
That's really interesting what you're saying about the max effort list, because I think most people hear, this is my max effort day, or I'm taking a max effort lift today, and they're like, conjugate must just max out all the time. But if you said to somebody, I regularly take a single at a 7 to 8 RP, like, that sounds pretty reasonable. Most kind of coaching methodologies have something to that effect. And so I think having an understanding of what these terms actually mean makes a huge difference as well, because doing a true, RP 10 and a half, whatever, once a week is very different to taking a single at 7 or 8 once a week, even though, that's you're kind of, like you said, you're doing it for that high degree of specificity and to train those like very high end specific above 90% skills. What Carli was saying was interesting with the having that different methodology that still fits within what I'd say the same philosophy. Something Mike Tuchia talks a lot about is you should be able to get from your kind of starting point and biases as a coach to wherever the athlete needs to be. And he always says, with my, with the framework he uses, how far outside of what he would just default start with, how far can he go? Could he get to something that looks like a Sitco, SBD every day? Could he get to something that hits a lift, a comp lift once every 3 weeks? Like, does your process and your methodology have the flexibility where if an athlete needs this end of the spectrum or that end of the spectrum or something way out there, can you actually get there? And so I guess the way that I sort of conceptualize it with this is it's not like, if somebody was coached by Carli versus by you, it's not like it's completely different coaching philosophy, but it's probably a different starting point. Like the defaults that you're going to start with and the first few things that you're going to try are very different. But I can imagine if you both had that, if we could, do a twin study, give you a twin each, then and those, theoretically those twins respond to the same thing, you should kind of converge on the same training approach. And maybe just, by happenstance, one of your default approaches is closer to what they end up with than the other, but you have to start somewhere with it. And I think it's a lot more about being really familiar with your starting point and with how to move through that than it is specifically what the starting point is, because the starting point's almost arbitrary. Like you just have to start with something, and then see how they respond from there. And I think it's how well you know your tools and how well you can then move the athlete through to eventually finding what they respond best to.
Yeah, 100%. I think ideally start with something that makes sense. That's why we spend a lot of time taking intake information, looking at someone's lifts and their history, their answers to the intake questionnaire, their onboarding call where you talk face to face is where you pick up a lot of their personality. So start with something that makes sense. But what you've just described is actually the process of individualized coaching and programming. It's then listen and look at the person in front of you and identify what is it that they actually need and start making those changes in a systematic way so you can see if it's working. And I love telling lifters at the beginning of working with them, it's like our starting point and our end point are going to look really different. Through the process of individualization and building something specifically for you, it's going to change and look different.
That's right. Yeah, it's all just systems at the end of the day, right? And it's how an individual fits into that system, and it's making the system work for them. So
another part of the conjugation method is the sort of repetition effort work. How does that fit in with the overall methodology, and like what's the purpose of that within the framework?
Yeah, so the repetition effort method, that's basically our GPP. That's where we're going to fit in. I think that's like around 80% of our work falls under that. That's like our accessories that we're using to build the main lifts. It's weak point training. So if we can identify through the max effort work where a lift is weak or where they're struggling, we can use the repetition effort to start targeting that muscle group. And also movement patterns. We can target the movement pattern with it. So it's building that up. It's building our like resilience in like joints and stuff, getting heaps of blood flow into there, strengthening up like joints, tendons, ligaments, all those things, as well as supporting muscles. Yeah. So that's going to add that's basically our base. Can even finish off training with like sled work, farmers carries, stuff like that. Get that fitness up. I think
basically strongman at that point.
Yeah, well, it can be used for strongman as well. I think a lot of people use it quite successfully for strongman too.
I feel like you fit a lot into a session, and sometimes I'm wondering, how do you fit so much into because your sessions are relatively short in the grand scheme of powerlifting. And I want to use this opportunity to tell our audience that you have a new baby on the way. So being able to be efficient with training in a short period of time is going to be a skill set that I think will serve you incredibly well. But how do you fit so much into such a short time?
I'd say the main thing's priorities. So what's your priority in training what are we prioritizing on the day? And then it's kind of just structuring everything around that. Like most of our sessions will never take more than an hour. Sometimes they take a little bit longer, but most of the time they're going to be cut under. So we usually, in that hour, we're going to be taking, it's like around 15 minutes for that max effort lift. We're usually taking about 7 sets from our warm up. So like, for example, do like 20 of the bar, 10 with 1 plate, another 5 or so with 2 plates, then a 3, then a 3, then just 1, 1, 1 until we get to that kind of 7th or 8th. Obviously, the stronger you get, it might take you a little bit longer to get warmed up as well. And then the kind of primary accessory, take that next 15 minutes where we're like hammering a heavy compound movement. And then it's all just GPP work and like single joint isolation work after that. So you can fly through them pretty quick. Example, the other day, I was on my way to work and I needed to get a session done. So it was my speed day. I got into the gym, 9 sets of 3 bench, followed by like some really heavy rows, 5 to 8 kind of rep range. And then I just hit a superset of like fly skull crushers, get it done, start building a bit of muscle, target like the prime movers on the bench. And then, yeah, just finish there, 25 minutes in and out. So
Jeez.
it's definitely possible. Yeah.
I spent 25 minutes warming up sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is so great because there's the common misconception that powerlifting is going to take you 2 to 3 hours. And if you can't dedicate 2 to 3 hours, 3 or 4 days a week, that you shouldn't even be in the sport. And that's just not true. The minimum effective dose or supersetting, you superset your accessories, you save yourself so much time. You literally can do your session in half the time. That's something I think we could really help people with, because I see people leave the sport. So like, I can't lift that long, that many days, but I love the sport. So the real message is there are alternatives. There are different methodologies. There are strategies. Minimum effective dose can work. I mean, Luke and I have this experience with worlds. You can win a world championships with minimum effective dose if you get it right. Since then, I've probably had to add in a few more accessories just to, keep the body healthy and such. But I think that's a really important message. I love keeping people in the sport that they enjoy. And I hate people having to leave the sport because they think they have to do something that's just not true.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they're talking about powerlifting with me, go, it looks so boring most of the time, or I don't have 2 hours to spend training every day.
With that 9 sets of 3, is that including warm-ups, or would you warm up and then hit 9 sets of 3 with like almost like a cluster set style with shorter rest between, or like what was the structure for that protocol like?
Yeah, so that's the dynamic day. So that's our speed work. I would warm up quickly. Like usually for me, I don't need too much of a warm up, but other people might. So obviously depends on the individual. I'll go in, warm up on the bar, chuck my band on. So the resistance band for accommodating resistance. Do another 10 reps of just that. Then I might just chuck on half of what I need. Do another like 3 reps, and then I might start with my first set of my working weight. And then everything's like, I take usually like 30 seconds to a minute rest between every set.
Okay, so it basically is like what you might call cluster sets, within sort of like other frameworks where it's like set short rest, set short rest.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
we're keeping the weight relatively light as well, so it's not too fatiguing, but also it has to be light enough that we can move the bar really quick. So that's like the main of it.
So it's still like maximal volitional intent, but with a low. I have a friend in Germany at the moment whose coach has been trialing cluster set deadlifts with him. So he takes 12 singles, and I think it's 20 or 30 seconds rest or something between. But it's been working really well for him. It's the first time I've seen somebody push like the kind of cluster set method that far with it. But it'd be similar. So it'd probably be like a higher percentage than what you're working with there because it's just singles, but the same sort of thing. It's light and fast, but 12 singles with a bit of rest between. But it's also quite a time efficient protocol, and I mean, like it's been working really well for him. So it's interesting to kind of see that that kind of lines up with what speed work can look like within conjugate.
Yeah, so even on our lower day when we're doing usually start off around 12 sets of 2 for a squat, and then deadlifts could be 12 sets of 1 as well. So very, very similar.
Yeah.
Can you give us an overview of one microcycle, typically a week of conjugate, just so someone who isn't familiar with the methodology can picture or imagine where everything is placed?
Yeah, so this is how I set up my training, probably the best example. On a Monday, I'll be taking a max effort lower. So build up to my 1 rep or 3 rep, depending on where I am. Then I'm going to hit a heavy accessory, depending on where I think my weakness is, what muscles I need to build. And then I'm going straight into that repetition work. So probably a 3 to 4 single joint kind of exercises. Then my second day will be a max effort upper. And I'll be taking a max effort bench or overhead press, followed by primary accessory, so nice and heavy compound again, and then into my repetition work. Then I'll have a day off or 2 days off, depending on how I'm feeling and how my week's kind of structured. And then on a Friday, I'll be taking my dynamic effort lower, which is my speed work for my squats, speed work for deadlifts. Depending on how I'm feeling, I might not take that primary accessory just to allow recovery, because it is quite a lot of volume, really short. And then it'll be, the main accessory and then a couple accessory movements after that. Saturday, speed bench, primary accessory, and then repetition work after that again. If someone does feel like they need more volume, we can put in like little 20-minute workouts with GPP, so like sled work, that farmers carries, like all that sort of stuff. Just keeping it super light, trying to get recovery in, kind of build some cardio.
One thing that really stood out to me that I really like about you as a person and as a coach is that you are constantly seeking out new information, new knowledge, mentorship. You literally in your downtime, you'll be reading about programming methodology nonstop. Like I see the books, I see the interactions you have with another mentor of yours. So you're highly motivated to keep learning, which I think is just an incredible skill for any coach to have. Can you tell us a little bit about the mentor that you work with and some of the other resources that you're pulling information from?
Yeah. So at the moment, I've just been doing like a kind of coaching mentorship with Kevin Can, who's the coach at Precision Powerlifting. And he trained under Boris Shaker as well, actually, and then ended up kind of slowly moving into the Conjugate Method. And loads of information off him. He's been recommending me so many books. So just trying to always find these books online. Some of them are a bit of a pain to get, or like, because trying to get them to New Zealand's like $200, $300. So half the time I'm just reading like the first few chapters of them all. Have a few of them that I've been able to find, luckily. Another like big influence is Charlie Francis, and he's the sprinting coach for the Canadian national team, or was in the 80s. And he prioritizes like the recovery first quite a lot, and like how to train high-end athletes and how to look for recovery and like individualization on recovery and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, a lot of that stuff I find super interesting.
There's really no limit to where you can source information from in this day and age. Like, we are in the information era where a lot of this stuff, like you said, the books are hard to find, but podcasts, information, articles, mentors, because I'm going into this because it's one of the most common questions I get asked from new coaches. How can I learn more about powerlifting coaching and programming specifically? And the number of resources out there is just phenomenal. Like you can go to Lifting Vault, Stronger by Science. There's a lot, obviously with our podcast, we're trying to encourage people and giving some information here as well. But there's so much out there. And so if you're a new coach wanting to learn programming, go and look for some of the stuff. We can definitely, us three, we can point you in the right direction to some incredible resources, and then read and study and try it on yourself. I would say exercise some caution before you try it on a guinea pig. Like maybe first try it on yourself. and once you have some experience or a qualification in physiology and anatomy or coaching or strength and conditioning, then you can start to guinea pig on a few willing, friendly volunteers, but there's so much out there. And so I really love that you are just very proactive in continuing your education. And I can tell from your personality that will never stop. You'll never stop learning.
I think it's really interesting too. You were saying reading up through the Canadian national sprinting stuff. I think a lot of the frameworks and methodologies that have let powerlifting training in the last 5 or 10 years take some larger jumps forward have actually been pulling from other sports. I know Mike Touchier with reactive training systems pulled a lot from throwers and stuff, and obviously applying it to the powerlifting context was just different. Even a while ago when I was looking into some of the how to quantify training load and long-term stress and stuff, cycling has some really cool frameworks and ways that they sort of quantify, how was this, first 6 months of training stress compared to the next one, and the sort of bigger picture things, which I think powerlifting is very focused on the microcycle a lot of the time and really getting that right. But I feel like as a sport, it's sort of turning the corner now where we're kind of able to do that longer term planning a bit more. And so I think the ability to read into other sports and go, okay, actually they've already figured this out and we're going to need to tweak it because, powerlifting isn't sprinting and powerlifting isn't throwing, but the frameworks they're using are actually, and the way that they, manage and track athletes is fantastic. And so I think the ability to recognize what is and isn't useful from other sports is massive.
Definitely agree with that. There's so much that we can pull from other sports and learn from other sports. I think a big one that I've identified, people with a martial arts background. Like there's just something about the undeniable, relentless pursuit and determination that fighting sport athletes have that I absolutely love. Like, I'm big on mindset, and I came from a movement neuroscience background where we're talking about motor imagery and mental skills constantly. And a lot of the research is in other sports, but that applied to powerlifting, I think is a real differentiator between someone who's good and someone who is amazing. So yeah, we can definitely learn from other sports and pull things in to our coaching practice or in our personal athletic endeavors. I think that's really powerful. And to read books from other coaches from other sports, you learn heaps about coaching in terms of communication. And we can't make an athlete do anything. We can only create the environment where they want to. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's absolutely fascinating. I'm going to change topics a little bit because the other thing I really wanted to talk about, it does relate to mindset, is your experience with a chronic illness. So you're into your powerlifting career. I think you'd already done a competition, and then tell us what happened.
Yeah, so I think it was maybe after my second comp even. I was working through that year, still building. I think I was starting to get some more PRs and everything. Was in a really good spot with training. And then some reason, don't know why it happened or how it happened, just started to get really sick and had to take 4 months off work, something like that, maybe 3 months. I was basically stuck on the bed the whole time, couldn't really move. Waking up every morning, throwing up, trying not to throw up, being nauseous, shaky, a lot of the time struggling to keep food down. I think I ended up in hospital with stomach cramps, really bad. They had to put me on IV drip so I could actually keep fluids in. And then got home, took the next few days off, went and saw my GP, gave me some tablets and basically just told me to like take the week off. Went back the next week, same thing again, keep taking those tablets, take more time off. Started to feel a bit better. I think I went to work for like a day or two. Same thing again, felt real sick at work. Ended up having to take more time off work. And then in the end, I think I was like so stressed with the GP and stressed with work. I ended up just resigning because I didn't want to like feel like I was letting a team down. So I was like, I'll just find another job when I feel better. Went back to the GP again, told me basically that the illness was like all in my head.
Wow.
And yeah, which kind of took me back. I don't think I've seen my wife that mad either when she heard that, because she works in like the medical, well, yeah, kind of in the same sort of system. Couldn't believe it. So I went and got another referral from a doctor. Basically told me after the second time I should have been referred to a specialist, sent me for more lab tests. Went back to my GP, told him I want a referral, and then he said to me, so when they decline the referral, then what are you going to do?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then I just said,
Find a new GP.
100%. Something so serious that you resign from your job, that you're unable to train and to sort of receive that response. Now, you know, not all medical professionals. It's just this one case, and
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
So what happened next?
got the referral, funnily enough, and then went to a specialist, and even he was like, this sounds pretty debilitating. Gave me kind of a guideline of stuff to eat while I was waiting. Oh yeah, actually the GP as well gave me all these special diets that I should be trying, which was just weird, like soup only diet, and then yeah, telling me I should be vegetarian for a while because I've made too much protein, which I found quite bizarre, but sure. Anyway, got the referral, went to the specialist, ended up having to get a camera put inside me to have a look what was going on. Turned out I had a hiatus hernia and esophagitis. So basically the inside of my stomach is pushed up and the like acid starts burning. So that was basically causing some sort of like gastritis earlier on. And yeah, making it very uncomfortable to do anything, train. I think I dropped like 10 or 12 kilos over that time. Yeah, ended up losing like maybe 40 odd kilos on my squat and deadlift by the time I got back to training. It was a rough time for sure.
I think it's really interesting what you said there with that first doctor obviously being a bit useless, but then going and getting the second opinion. And I think people get lost between, oh, you should trust medical professionals, but that doesn't mean you have to trust every single one. And I think getting a second opinion can be so useful in that sort of situation, sort of advocating for yourself. Because if you see 5 doctors that are totally unrelated and they all say the same thing, then you're like, okay, maybe they're right. But like if something sounds off, whether it be a doctor or a physio or even a coach, like actually just getting a second opinion and being like, does this sound right? Like, does this, because like you said, that second GP said we should have got onto that way earlier. And I think that's such an important thing to think about, is being able to actually get a second opinion and sort of advocate for yourself to check, because it is really hard, I think, when you are the person going through something, to be able to figure out what is actually the objective reality of the situation versus what you're experiencing.
And there's a power differential, like we put professionals and doctors, and even as coaches, there's a power differential that you have to be really aware of when you're working with an athlete. And if there is a power differential, we have to empower them and we have to help them advocate for themselves, even with us, definitely with challenging medical situations. Like, I know how hard it is. I think I was posting to my stories yesterday about being completely dismissed about, having chronic exertional compartment syndrome for 2 years because I was a girl. It's like, no, girls don't fit that, rugby players, army people have this, not little girls. And I was like, but wait a minute, can you just test me? So I guess what I'm saying is, it sounds like that gave you a lot of empathy and understanding for the athletes that you work with, right?
Yeah, definitely.
At what point were you? So I assume that once you're bedridden and not working, that you are not training for a period. What happened with your training? Like, at what point did the training pause, and then at what point were you able to actually start introducing training again? And what did that first few weeks or whatever of training look like?
Mm.
Yeah, so basically the minute I was stopping working, I was stopping training.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I think the whole time I was on the couch, I was studying again because there was nothing else I could do. So I may as well use my time for something, right?
Solid.
Yeah. And then,
Silver lining.
yeah. And then getting back into it, I just started jumping back into training how I kind of knew it. Same sort of setup I'm doing now. Not pushing those true maxes because obviously I was in a much more weaker spot, but just getting moving again. I think it took me a few months to start moving again properly and not being too sore or uncomfortable. And then after that, I started working with Burley Hawk as a coach. So he's one of the guys from Westside. And then, yeah, about 18 months later from that now. And then finally hitting PRs and training's looking a lot better than it used to. So yeah, pretty happy now. I think the process of like learning again and going through like the building was actually really enjoyable looking back. Kind of chasing my old numbers, and then after that, starting to hit higher and triple my old numbers and fives. And yeah, it was actually, I think, really enjoyable after like having to take that massive step back. So
I love that so much.
Yeah.
Like, just enjoying being back at training, and you have that renewed gratitude for being able to do the thing that you love. And here we've got an example of finding the wins and also PRs. We talked about this before. It's like, oh, post sickness PR. This is great,
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, not being able to train definitely affected my mental health a lot. So it was probably the most important thing, getting back into training and actually enjoying stuff again. So
Well, huge credit to you for the rebuild. Yeah, amazing that you didn't quit, but were able to come back and do it in a way that has you where you are now.
With the condition you did have, my understanding, like you were saying before, was that sort of your stomach pushing through a gap in your diaphragm or something to that effect. Did you find that you had to relearn how to brace or brace differently? Because obviously, diaphragm's kind of pretty important with creating that intra-abdominal pressure. So what was that like? Did you kind of just have to wait until it was better and then you could return to bracing as you used to, or did you sort of have to rebuild that a bit?
So it's still there. I've still not got it like fixed. I think if it gets worse, I'll have to get surgery done. But at the moment, it's still there. But yeah, just focusing, I think, on making that core really strong. So heaps of ab work. And then with the brace as much, I don't notice it so much on my squat and bench, but on my deadlift, I feel like I want to throw up every single time now. So it's pretty uncomfortable for deadlifting most of the time. But I don't think I've had to change too much. Sometimes I just play around with where the belt sits.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Do you wear a belt or do you position it somewhere differently?
Yeah, I've still playing around trying to figure it out. Everywhere just feels uncomfortable at the moment. I'm not sure if it ever will feel comfortable.
That makes a lot of sense.
So we've got you hitting all new PRs in the gym regularly, and you've recently had athletes compete, and you helped some of my athletes. So we'll talk a little bit about your most recent competition that was, and also the most nearest competition to come. So tell us about Bar Wars.
Bar was pretty fun. That was the first like major experience I've had of like coaching and handling at a meet. So I had 2 lifters enter. That one is in the novice side of it. Gary, who's our boxing coach at the gym I work at, he was always kind of on the edge of whether he should compete or not, and we're like, oh, just do it, man, just have fun. And then he ended up signing up for it. So they decided to enter pretty late, which was quite frustrating. But luckily, I'd worked with Gary long enough to kind of know where he was at. So we ended up taking a few lifts, then putting him into a little peaking phase, and then getting to the comp. He finished second overall in the comp. So his first competition on the novice side, he finished second, which is pretty awesome. And that was like 2 weeks before his 60th birthday as well. So pretty stoked for him. Probably start looking towards nationals for him next year, hopefully. And then Widamu, the owner of our gym, he's been training for quite a while. We didn't have to do too much because obviously he's pretty experienced. Basically just helping him set up the choices on the day, helping him through the lifts, and he ended up getting the best total that he's ever got in a comp. And yeah, he was saying like it was just so much easier having me with him there. Yeah, maybe it was because I know him, but maybe it was just the like confidence and like ability for us to go back and forth and make decisions and take some of the responsibility off him. Yeah.
It's one of the biggest things that we recommend for a new lifter. If you can have a powerlifting coach with you, great. But if not, have a support person, because it just takes a whole lot of the thought process off the athlete and allows the athlete to really focus on the lifting.
Yeah.
So cool that you were able to do that with Gary and Widamu. And I really appreciate you midday coached 2 of my lifters, and they had super successful days as well. They absolutely loved it. They enjoyed it. They gave me rave reviews about you. Part of the reason why I hired you, that was like a little bit of a test. I like testing you. So had you midday coach some of my athletes. You also presented a seminar on Conjugate Method with a lot more structure and science than perhaps a conversational podcast. And yeah, you passed a bunch of the tests with just flying colors. And now you have a new test because you're coaching one of not my powerlifting athlete, but I used to coach this guy when he did martial arts years ago. And now you're coaching him for powerlifting. And I have high expectations for you to do an amazing job with this guy. Tell us what comp he's prepping for. What's the next one?
Yeah. So with Tristan, we're working towards Get Strength comp. So he's just signed up for that. Yeah, he's only just started into powerlifting as well. But it's been interesting because obviously probably my way of coaching and like my systems were probably not what he quite expected. And we've had to have a couple conversations about how we structure training and like why we do specific things. But
Can I give you a little bit of context? So Tristan did martial arts as a young, very, very young athlete. I won't tell you how young because that makes me really old. And then he went into strength training and bodybuilding. So he did his first bodybuilding show, and now he's going from bodybuilding to powerlifting. And I think a lot of people think all lifting is the same. But powerlifting and bodybuilding are very, very different sports with very different end outcome. So I remember something he said to me was like, feeling your weakest on stage doesn't feel super great. So he didn't want to do another bodybuilding show. And I suggested maybe powerlifting because it's the exact opposite. You feel your absolute strongest on the platform. So you've had to have some conversations with Tristan about different methodologies. But I also see him hitting PBs in his training footage. I'm like, man, he's doing amazing.
Yeah, he's crushing it. He's doing really well. I hope he's enjoying it as much as I am, to be fair.
So what you were saying before with the role of having a handler and a coach on board at a first comp or at any competition and being able to share some of that responsibility, I think lines up so well with what we discussed in the first Barbell and Beyond podcast episode with the other coaches on the tools and the things that you can do in a first competition to make it easier. So it's really interesting to hear you pretty much recount the same things as far as the role that you see that playing with that. So if anyone's interested in hearing more about that and hearing from the other Barbell and Beyond coaches on their first powerlifting experiences, that first episode pretty much outlines kind of what you were saying here as far as your experience and your insights on that.
Yeah, we've got some other upcoming events in the pipeline. So Lukas and I, we've been chatting and planning and scheming. Can you tell us a little bit more about the powerlifting workshops that you are planning? And please plug your gym. Please plug the gym where you do personal training, currently teaching and coaching strength classes. So tell us a little bit more about the workshops coming up.
Just working on some workshops to build some like foundational knowledge for people on the squat, bench, and deadlifts. So I work at NZ Iron Strength. It's a gym in Browns Bay, and yeah, come down and check it out. It's a fun little gym, good community. Yeah,
I can highly second that. I came and trained with you there to meet you in person for the first time, and it was a really cool space. Got the competition rack, got some good bars and plates and everything, but also just the way the space is designed and got good lighting, got a posing room. Definitely a cool space.
So currently you're coaching group strength sessions, and the idea with the workshops is to have one for bench, one for squat, one for deadlift, and anyone of any ability can come and get some technical coaching.
Yep. So it'll just be a breakdown of the like information, and then get into some form work, and then I kind of want everyone to get lifting, and then I can start teaching them some like little cues or tips and tricks that they might be able to improve on. So I kind of want to make it quite hands-on. I don't want everyone to sit there and just listen to me talk about benching or squatting or deadlifting all day. So yeah.
So they'll get some real practical experience with some fantastic feedback from you. And just want to plug your coaching a little bit. Obviously you coach online with us. So if you're interested in online coaching with Lukas, you can find the link in the show notes and in our Instagram bios. But Lukas, you also coach in person. So you're available for personal training sessions, technique sessions. What's the best way for people to reach you?
Just message me on Instagram. I assume by the time this episode's aired, it'll be Lukas at Barbell and Beyond. Is that it? Is that probably something like that? Yeah.
.online.
Yeah. So yeah, or go through the Barbell Beyond page and you'll find my link as well.
Awesome. Look, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. And I also want to give a huge thanks to Luke Selway for introducing us. I'm super grateful. Another one of your brilliant ideas, and I'm very, very thankful to you. So that brings us to the end of this podcast. We hope that you've learned a whole lot more about Lukas Shaw, our new coach, as well as conjugate methodology and how that aligns with each of our independent coaching ethos and some shared values.
Thanks for having me on.
For the highest quality, personalized online coaching that will see you achieving your best powerlifting results, book a call with one of our expert coaches at Barbell and Beyond. We specialize in competition prep, nutrition for powerlifting, and helping you develop an elite athlete mindset. All of that and more can be found over at barbellandbeyond.online.